Welcome to an exhilarating LinkedIn Live series, Leading in the Digital Era. In this rapidly evolving technological landscape, the abundance of information can be overwhelming, and the ability to adapt to constant change is crucial for effective leadership. Host Robert Field understands the importance of staying connected to people, customers, and evolving trends. In this series, Robert takes part in engaging discussions with top executives. Together, they unveil the secrets behind their successful transformation of leadership styles, enabling them to flourish amidst the frenzied pace of the digital era. As a LinkedIn Live session, this is your chance to gain invaluable insights and strategies to empower your own leadership. Feel free to share your comments and questions in the chat. This is Leading in the Digital Era, presented by the Institute for Digital Transformation.
Hi. I'm excited for this show. As everyone knows, a big part of what I do is supporting and building my network, and building allies at the C-level is a really important thing that I believe is part of your success to your career. But as we move into our third show, I'm really appreciative of all your support. Please continue to share your ideas. We have Leading at a Hybrid Workforce coming up soon. We're trying to schedule Leading Through Disruptive Change with Stephanie Crevens. If you've listened to our podcast, Hot Mess Hotline, I think you'll be looking forward to that. But what I really want to mention today is, as you know, I started this originally in a conversation with Tabitha Saris and Michael Smith, and we're working towards our next show, which was announced today, which is on September 21st, which officially announced with the link today, with Andrea Markstrom and Michael Smith for Tech Day in Pink. And John will pop up a link where you can see and join our Institute for Digital Transformation's journey to helping support Tech Day of Pink. And we're here to do our best to help support not only our community, but the people around us. And I really appreciate everyone's time that they've done to support me in this, and the feedback I've gotten. It goes a long way, and I thank you. So for today's show, joining me, and I'd like to introduce everyone individually, I have a wonderful, wonderful panel, and it's something unique that as a IT leader, you never really get the opportunity to network as to why networking is important and building these allies from other IT executives. So the first person I'd like to introduce today is Adrienne Matt. Adrienne's a fractional CIO. She serves the mid-market CEOs of business-to-business professional service companies with over 2 decades of award-winning work at top ad agencies in New York and London. I don't think there's much she's done or hasn't solved, and our conversations have proven that. Adrienne enjoys the challenge of greenfield projects, 14 to date, including tenure at Citibank's Innovation Lab. She's a frequent guest lecturer at Columbia's Business School, NYU Stern, and the New School, sharing what she's learned about working with over 40 Fortune 500 companies. Adrienne's a seasoned strategic leader who sets the marketing agenda based on business goals. Welcome, Adrienne.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Next on our panel is Lisa Meyer. Lisa's a seasoned product executive with over 25 years of experience in innovation, product management, and strategic planning. Throughout her career, she's launched over 150 projects globally, demonstrating her expertise encompassing a full life cycle of projects. Understanding the hurdles to get to projects to market and the expectations of a product's ROI, Lisa is skilled in identifying opportunities and mitigating risks. In addition to launching products, she's also launched new markets in North America and China, launched a SaaS two-way platform, and created multiple product monetization opportunities. Today's Lisa's focus on helping organizations elevate product performance and articulate the product vision to both internal and external stakeholders. Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
And our last panelist is Jessica Carroll. Many of you know her as an Institute Fellow, and Jessica and I have been friends for going on over a decade, I believe now. Jessica is the Chief Experience Officer, which, if you get an opportunity to talk to her, how she got this role, it's very interesting for those of you who are looking for a new role, and talk to Jessica about how she moved into the role of a Chief Experience Officer. She's there at Acutive. Did I say that right, Jessica? Acutive, sorry. As a network as a service company, she's responsible for creating customer-centric culture, driving customer success. Jessica has over 30 years of experience in the technology industry, including 20 years as IT leadership roles. As a customer-centric leader, Jessica is a strategic thinker who helps organizations create customer-centric cultures, driving business growth through outcome-driven customer success. She's an evangelist for the digital transformation culture, the customer experience, and a speaker and writer on all of these topics. Stop by the Institute's page and you can see a lot of Jessica's writings, and I promise you it's a good read. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you taking your time today, and I look forward to this.
Yeah. So nice to be here.
And Jessica's our first fellow, actually, to join the Leader in the Digital Era, so I'm going to throw it out to the other fellows that your time's coming. Just wait.
He will find you.
So we spent some time meeting, all of us, and I really, really appreciate this, because as an IT leader, we know that the relationships are really, really important, so we don't get looked at as just the IT guy in the room. And having the relationship across the organization is critical to our success and how we go about building the solutions we need together. Nothing today, I believe, is an IT product. I think everything is an IT project. I think everything's a project for the business. And I think, if anything, the good that we came from COVID is COVID proved to IT leaders that IT is really important to the business itself. But the relationships, I think, is where it all started, long before technology or anything else. And I think the first question I'd like to get from each of you is, when did you first realize it was important to start building peer relationships within the organization?
Always.
And I'd like to say ladies first, but that can get you in a little trouble here. So.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking back even to my journalism days, when I was a journalist before I came into marketing. So senior producer at Fox Sports Broadband, and we were dealing with a T1 line from LA to the New York studio so that we could get the video. And having worked in television and dealt with satellite uplinks and that kind of thing to ESPN or whoever we were broadcasting for and with, always having that partnership with IT. And so back then it was like, we just had that one line. I was like, Charlie, we need a backup. Charlie, we need a backup. And kind of getting the verbal pat on the head of like, that's my domain, it'll be fine. And, like 10 days later, MCI had a total blackout. We couldn't get our video from LA to the New York studios. And I could not say, I told you so. We had to figure out how to fix it, right? We had to figure out a way to get video from the West Coast. Where are we going to uplink it to? What satellite can we borrow? Like, how can we fix this, right? So that was a challenge, early in my career that I knew I would, bring into marketing in terms of making those relationships work, regardless of whether or not we had a different POV on what the status was or how to solve a problem, but we had to solve it together.
Well, I love that. And I think, I was joking that always, I've always felt that we need to have those cross communications and relationships. And that's true. But I think sort of to layer on, Adrienne, just kind of getting into the head of the other person and understanding their point of view is really a key to that too. So I think step one, as you described, is knowing that you've got to create that relationship, but it's more than just that. I think it's really, having an honest interest in the perspective of the other person and understanding what matters to them. Because once you do that, well, then you can sort of maneuver around, well, how do we solve this problem together in a way that benefits everybody, as opposed to sort of that, you must do things my way kind of path, which doesn't work at all.
No, it doesn't.
Interesting. I'll share as well. The question really challenged my memory to go back through and identify when that point was. And what is interesting for me, and I will just share, especially for those up and coming leaders, is that early in my career, I did not recognize that. So you're so focused on the training, performing, what is your next move, that there has to be something, that triggered that for me. And there was a point in time in my career when I had to launch a new market. And it was then that I had to go back through my Rolodex. Who do I know that can do this, this, this? And it challenged me to say, what kind of relationship do you have with them to actually ask them to step into this role and share their time? And even then, and that was middle career, even then, you don't recognize the true value if you're just looking inside your sphere, which is inside your internal organization. And a lot of times you have the opportunity, if you're in a sales role or marketing role, maybe to build relationships outside the organization with the vendor or, you know, with clients and customers. But if you don't have that opportunity, you're really narrow in your ability to network internal to your organization. So what I suggest today that I, you know, have more time to really learn and understand the value is right away start understanding your touch points, especially outside of your organization, building those relationships with a broader reach, and even asking those relationships, you know, to introduce you to new people, and never allow the competitive nature to create the relationship barriers. And I bring that up because I did that in my past, and that's something I would share today.
Yeah,
So
I think
I love that.
I was just going to add that I think that anyone that knew me back in the beginning would probably say that I had a lot to learn there too. So it has been a learning experience over time. I agree with that. I that wasn't my natural instinct probably right out of the gate.
Yeah.
I love not letting your competitive nature get in the way of building those relationships, not in trying to get to the greater good. Adrienne shared a story with us as to something in her early career where that network became important. But Lisa, was there a moment throughout your career, and I appreciate you being authentic and letting us know that it was a learned experience for you, but was there a project or an experience that led you to say that you can't do it on your own? Because I don't think anybody could do anything on their own. Was there that epiphany moment for you?
Yeah, it was, again, it was the point in time when I was trying to launch a new market, where you start to realize that you don't know everything, and you're going to need to lean on people that really come with expertise and challenge you to look more broadly. And it's that point in time that you have to really let your walls down and be transparent with what it is that you don't know. Right. So that balance of really starting to build a relationship that has a broader foundation than I need you, but really starting to build it over time that says, I trust you. And so that I bring that up because trust is so critical in these relationships, especially in today's environment when things are moving so incredibly fast. Relationships will never move as fast as the technology is moving us. So how do you build that that sharing and transparency and trust that will take you quite a ways in how strong and long this relationship will last and will support you.
Trust is important, and how you gain that trust, especially with the speed that we're moving and having to move from one product to the next with maybe tighter budgets and more expectations on returns. How do we do that? How do we build that trust? And I know Jessica, you played when you're a new role and being an IT leader, right? How do you now build that trust with the IT team that you're working with?
I think it's coming into this with respect for everyone else. To me, respect is sort of step one in this. So I mentioned earlier, yeah, I need to be a good listener, which I admittedly always haven't been. So I try every day harder. But I think that's step one. But the respect piece goes hand in hand with that. So, you know, you need to care about the other person's what's valuable to them. And I think alongside of that, the question becomes is, okay, how can I add value to you? How can I help you? So I want something out of this. I have a task I'm after, but how can I help you? Because I need you, but you need me too in some fashion. And let's uncover that. And I think showing value to the other individual or entity, ultimately they start to gain some trust with you because they know you're going to come to them with something that is useful to them. So it becomes sort of a win on both sides.
I'm going to offer that trust is also impacted by your level of listening, right? So if you're listening to learn, if you have intentional curiosity around listening, then to Jessica's point, it's easier to find like, well, what is valuable to you? And you're bringing them that value. So for the introverts asking like, how do you network? Like they get frozen. You just ask one question and listen. Just listen. So to Jessica's point, you find their values, you find ways to connect that are like really, it's like the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the barrier is really low, right? So look for those little things to connect on, and then you connect on something bigger, and you're leading into values and coming at it with respect, like Jessica said. And it's kind of like a layered cake of like listening. Oh, that's their value. Oh, they need this. How can I provide it? Like, oh, they're hurting over here. How can I alleviate that pain? You know, maybe they have a roadblock that, although it's not your jurisdiction, maybe you could have a conversation to help eliminate that roadblock for them, right? So that kind of layered cake of listening to build the relationship and build trust.
The active listening part, and listening is so critical to at least having empathy and understanding the person you're talking to, and that trust it's the key element to that trust. I don't know who asked it, but we just had a great question, and by the way, thank you for these tips. Right, we're not just talking about why it's important, but we're giving tips here. And we just had a question: how do shy introverts start networking? And the introvert extrovert conversation, right? For most IT people, start off as shy introverts, right? We're behind the screen, writing code, building networks, stuck in a data center somewhere, and not building these allies with potentially 3 very dynamic people I'm talking to here who are very successful in their own right, who are responsible for tremendous amount of revenue throughout their organizations. But how do you know, probably half of our audience is an IT professional that started off writing code behind the screen, not talking to someone. So how do we give advice to those early in their career who might be shy and introverted to start networking? Any thoughts?
So I'll throw this out. First of all, I haven't really had, my personality is one to reach out. So I'm more of an extrovert. But I will tell you, I would love people to come and ask the questions or share information. And for those that are uncomfortable, my suggestion would be start with people that you do have strong relationships with, and identify some common interest and talk about, you know, sharing, and ask for introductions to people they know, and start it that way, because you're going to feel more comfortable if somebody that you already have a relationship with introduces you. So I guess that's what I would offer up. And the second part of that is, remember, people love to talk about themselves. And so just trying to find that common thread and opening up the conversation that way. For myself, I would love to hear from any IT expert that's willing to teach and share. And I promise you, I'm listening. So I'll throw that out maybe as a starting point. And I'd love to hear Jessica and Adrienne's comments as well.
I would tell you that I purposely put myself in positions that made me uncomfortable with the networking element of it. When I really started to network, I did this intentionally, and put myself in groups that made me uncomfortable. So, for example, going into, say, a cocktail party where everyone's already in these little small groups, chatting around a high top table, but all engrossed. Kind of walking into that scenario and breaking into a conversation, wow, was that uncomfortable. So I made myself do it over and over and over again. I'm not going to say it's my favorite thing to do, but try and try again. It kind of got me kind of over that hurdle, and then opened up all these new connections and relationships and conversations that were wonderful. So it was worth being uncomfortable.
So Jessica, I'll just throw out a question for you. Do you still feel that you're an introvert, or have you kind of created more of a position of outreach and enjoying the conversation? I'm curious.
This is a funny question to me, because my husband and everyone in my personal life would tell you that I'm an introvert, and every test I take and everyone I work with would tell you that I'm an extrovert. So I'm not quite sure where I think I am an extrovert. I'm going to go with, by the time I get home, I don't want to talk anymore. So I go into my shell, and it feels great. Let everybody else know.
I'm going to riff on something Lisa said, and even Jessica said, like having those introductions. So even if you don't know somebody, and just asking them, like, who here should I meet? Who's interesting to talk to? And just asking one person that question, then they can kind of take you by the hand and lead you around the room. And that's a way to break the ice, to just, if you're brave enough to ask one person who here is interesting? Who should I talk to? And they can then be your guide and help you and then introduce you, and then they now know your full name and they maybe know your title or what company you're with, right? So it makes it easier for those introductions. So I'm hoping that helps as having someone lean into being uncomfortable and just ask someone for help. Because most people are going to say yes, they're going to help you.
I agree. I love that.
I think people always want to help. I think that's their underlying core. They want to help. And I've always grown up realizing that if you think you can do something on your own, remember you have a belly button, and then you realize you can't. But I've spent, and Tamara just posed a great question. I spent a lot of time over my career always trying to read the room, see who's there, and championing the voices. And over the last few months, and with Andrea's show coming up, through a couple I Will events and Women in Cybersecurity, I hear a lot of women walk into a room and say that they don't feel like they have the same voice in a room, or it's harder for them to build those relationships. My question to you guys, especially in building these relationships, is it different when you walk into a room that's predominantly male and you might be the only female walking in the room? Is there a different approach you take than when you walk into a room with all females, or are you building a relationship differently with other people depending on the type of gender we're looking at in the room?
I'm going to say straight up that I don't have a difference. I will walk in the room and open up to anybody. I will ask for a seat at the table anytime, anywhere. It is rare that someone says no. And if they were to say no, I wouldn't want to know them anyway. So I think it's just, I approach both scenarios the same, with the same confidence. And I am who I am. My gender is a part of me, but it's not anything that defines anything about me other than this is me as a person. And I'm happy to sit with men, women. It's all the same to me.
Yeah. So I'm gonna jump on that. Jessica, 100% agree. I've never felt a situation where because of who was in the room, it challenged me. A lot of times what I would suggest to people is sometimes you create that insecurity in your head. When you walk in, everybody is on the same playing field. And that's why I walk in and represent myself.
Love that.
So I have kind of a funny story. I was at Ogilvy at the time doing work with E-Trade, and room full of finance people, so mostly men in suits. And I saw a woman, and I had seen that dress before, and I knew it had pockets. So I was like super excited that she was wearing this dress that I had been eyeing, I think at Anthropology or something. And so I'm going over to her and saying, like, that dress looks amazing. Is it blue or is it black? And then she's like, I don't know, but it has pockets. And that was our bonding moment. She was the CMO for E-Trade at the time. So it enabled us to connect on that very human level, dresses with pockets. Amen. And then, it helped to facilitate a really hard conversations that we had to have that day in the room. I just love, that dress still is in my mind. And no, gender doesn't define a person, but also knowing maybe how to connect to people. So do I connect to men differently than I do women? Yeah, maybe because of social norms, right? But to Jessica and Lisa's point, it doesn't define me or how I would interact with them. I'm going to be direct. I'm going to ask the questions I need to ask so that I can get my job done. I'm going to maybe ask pointed or difficult questions to senior leadership so that we can have the best outcome. So I'm still going to come with my A game regardless of who's in the room.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, and I think this is kind of funny, I actually love it. There have been multiple times in my career where my team or my colleagues have mistakenly called me he and referred to me in the male form. And I love it. It's like, okay, we're just invisible as to, we don't need to think about male, female. We're here to work. And I love that, actually.
Well, guys, this is fantastic. Let's keep going then. But I thank you. Listen, it's a great topic and it's a great approach, and I appreciate and applaud all of you for doing that. So, and I leave it to the CMO to give us a great story on her experience to that. But I'd like to add another story to this, if you don't mind. Then, how about a time where it's been difficult? If you could share the story and maybe the strategy to overcome it, we've had a difficult time building those allies in a situation, a strategic situation of work, where maybe you tried to build a relationship with someone, but it just wasn't there, and it might have affected the outcome of the relationship, or at least the work you're trying to get done. It's good that you guys never have trouble building relationships, but they happen, right? So you can't get along with everybody.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
You've completely stumped me on this one.
Yeah, my wheels are turning here.
So let me throw this out. So there has been situations where, you know, there's a different leadership style, or you butt heads because you have a strong position or opinion. And depending on what the circumstance is, sometimes your best path is to look at the layers of relationships you have in an organization. So there may be a roadblock there, right? But have you cultivated your relationships at several different levels in the organization, and maybe even with people around the person that, you know, that is your roadblock? And sometimes that's the best way to really get the message out there. You may have to set the ego aside and say, this idea needs to come from somebody else, because the way I'm presenting it or the way I'm approaching it is falling flat on its face. So that would be my suggestion. And you know, I can give several examples, but just in summary, what I would say is make sure you're cultivating those relationships at every level, and identify how people respond to other people, so that if you need to get something done or a message out, you use those relationships to put that position or that you know, that idea on the table.
Well, I think that's great advice. I like the last thing that you had said there, Lisa, that, you know, really understanding if there is an individual or a group that you're having difficulty sort of breaking through with, who do they relate to, and kind of going at it from the other direction, putting the ego aside. I love that. Sometimes it's better to work in the background than in the front, and be okay with that. I mean, keep your eye on the outcome you're after, and it doesn't really matter who gets it there, as long as it gets there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that the teams that I've led, they know that I protect them. I protect them from the shenanigans going on around. So like when push comes to shove, I know my team is going to show up for me and produce. So building those relationships and alliances, like you were saying, at all levels. So, you know, people coming in fresh from grad school or college, and like finding out what makes them tick and what values they have, so I can better relate to them, and so that I can give them assignments that are going to challenge them and find out where they want to grow and that type of thing. So building alliances that way. But even with peers, you know, in different business units, finding out the same thing with them to find out what makes them tick. Like, what are you good at? What do you stink at? Where do you want to grow? What kind of projects do you want to work on? Like, and understanding that. And then, so then creating kind of the, having a peer group that you understand better, and then understanding that other layer and level above them. And so to Jessica's point, like building those alliances kind of around maybe the decision maker or the roadblock sometimes, and then have their peers rally on your behalf because you've built those relationships.
So I just want, for the people that are here now listening, and maybe those who are watching in the future, one Pete taught us, and maybe with one of the sessions on our first show, or maybe where so I'm talking about our most valuable moment. And one of my most valuable moments with the four of us here was, and I'll never forget, the passion that goes, the amount of work that goes into building this is not easy, and it's easier with three dynamic people like you. But the passion that came up when we talked about this specific topic, it's not about building relationships at the C level, it's about building relationships throughout the whole entire organization. At that point, I knew that we were kindred forever, because of the same energy that we went. And I remember where I was sitting at the doctor's with my daughter that day, but the energy went from, you know, a pretty high level to through the roof. So it is building it at every level of the organization. And that's how you truly influence the C level, by making sure that you build the relationships everywhere. Is it different building the relationships at different levels of the organization? And how do you approach that? I know we didn't prep this question, by the way, but I did without telling you.
I just want to lead into that by saying, you know, I believe so strongly that every level in the organization is important. And so caring about and having interest at every, with every sort of layer, we've used this word a few times today, I think is so critical. And also, having that empathy and caring about the part that every person plays, regardless of what level they are in. And I think, a lot of times folks that are sort of on the ground in the trenches, they're probably some of the most important people in an organization, and they know an awful lot about the day-to-day and how things work. So kind of exploring that with them is to everyone's benefit, including yours as a leader, and bringing that up to your C-suite peers is also important. That's a voice not to be missed.
And that'll come out in sometimes stakeholder interviews, things like that, or you're doing primary research. So you're talking to the people in the trenches, and you're then laddering that up to some decision makers being like, hey, I can give you 3 examples of when customer service is falling through the cracks. Look at these call centers, dialogue. We dropped the ball here, we dropped the ball here. So if you don't want to invest in this, I'm showing you reasons why we should. So again, it's looking at different levels within the company and laddering that up, because it's especially in marketing, I have that virtuous cycle with the sales team, right? And be like, what are they saying out in the field? How are they talking about the product or service? What was the decision point? What was the yes and or yes but, right? And having those conversations and using the voice of the customer in our marketing material so that they're like, oh, that feels like me. Yeah, that is me. I understand what that is. So having that feedback loop is really important for the customer experience, and whether it's the onboarding, whether it's the offboarding, whether it's what's the first 100 days like with this company, right? But without knowing what that experience is from surveys or interviews that you're doing, you're not going to know that. And that's where you can fix things and build a stronger net in your communications across all BUs.
Yeah. And I appreciate everyone's comments and position on it. What I will add to that is it's hard to be a really strong leader if you don't have a pulse on your organization. So really learning what your team is doing. They're hands-on with, whatever the project is, the feedback from the customers, the clients. You have to know what's happening in your organization to really drive the direction you want the company to go. So I'll just add that and compliment with what these wonderful ladies have said.
Well, that, and then going back to Adrienne, I love the customer experience piece of it. If we don't know what our customers think, need, want, value, how can we even really deliver what we think we're here to deliver? So I love what both of you said. That ties so neatly to me.
IT leader, everybody's your customer, whether they're an external from the organization or inside the organization.
Yeah.
DMO, the chief experience officer, the chief product officer, everybody's our customer, and we have to treat them all and know where they're coming from for every perspective. Otherwise, you're not a service organization, which is what an IT leader is, right? At the end of the day, and no different than anybody else on this call. So to switch it a little bit to culture, because I think having good relationships affects the culture as well. How important is fostering these relationships to the culture of the organization, especially when things go awry and there's work to get done, and the things we weren't prepared for come and hit that we have to now turn our attentions to, and those relationships become increasingly important. How important is building these relationships to the culture of an organization, and how do we deal with someone when they're too busy to deal with us, when we have to get our marketing information out, or we have to raise revenues due at the end of the quarter or end of the year, or finance has to close the books? How do we handle that when people are overworked and don't have the free time to do anything else?
Well, I sorry for jumping in, but I think it comes down to does everybody understand the purpose? And if there's a purpose we are sort of focused on, is it a purpose that they relate to? So getting past those silos, which every company sort of typically tends to have, not every company, but a lot of companies tend to have. There are ways to break through that. The relationship piece of it is a huge part of it. But I would say in tandem with that, it's the purpose. does this group you need desperately to help resolve or do or whatever the task may be, are they aligned with you to the purpose of what the company is after here? And if so, then it becomes an easier conversation. If not, then that's a cultural path that you kind of need to dig into and kind of help raise up, in my opinion.
I think you need to beat the drum of what is your mission, what is your vision, what is your purpose. Like you have to beat that drum. And so at a minimum quarterly, right? Where it's not just, oh, we're going to have an all hands meeting and everyone's got Zoom fatigue or whatever. It's just like, we're just going to remind each other, why the dickens are we here? What are we doing this for? Why does this even matter? Right? So reinforcing the culture by reflecting to the broader team. And that's, it can be top down, like at an all hands meeting, but it can also be bottoms up, so that you're reminded of what is the mission, the purpose, the values, right? And how am I living into that? Is that my best self, right? And when you find people who are not aligned with your culture, it's much easier for them to step aside and go elsewhere, right? So, but I do think it's important, like at least on a quarterly basis, to really reflect on and take in the mission, the vision, and the values to underline the culture that you are then cultivating.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree. Repeat, right? And what I would also add is organizations today in this digital age really need to think about their structure. So some companies are still managing a very functional structure, meaning they have siloed components. And I know that a lot of our conversation has been about collaboration. Collaboration is so critical. And if your company culture is not supporting that, those silos can actually be detrimental to your ability to get, product or message to market. So I'll just add on to what these ladies have said and highlight that it depends on where you are as far as your organizational structure and what you want as part of your culture. Have you aligned your organization to support that? Number one. And number two, for those that, may be trying to identify how they fit in a culture today, sometimes it's not a fit. And that's something to also take in consideration, depending on where you are in your position level or path for career growth.
And just one last thing on that too. Conversely, for those that actually, exude that behavior and passion and are really have that energy to support the mission that you're after and are doing so in such a way that is supporting your customers, let's celebrate that. Find ways within the organization to culturally make that part of the fabric, that we want to celebrate those individuals that are exhibiting the behaviors that really the company is looking to kind of put out there.
Great. And I want to come back to the siloed conversation in a minute that Lisa brought up, but Dale asked a great question here. Has any in the panel ever seen a Gen Y or Gen Z C-level and interface with them and accordingly? And it's an interesting knowing the different generations. And as we know, there are 5 generations of workforce now, but at this point, we're experiencing more Gen Y, Gen Z in the workforce and in C-level as well. How does that affect your approach?
So I would say yes, and a lot of those companies are companies led by young CEOs that are already embracing collaboration, the digital environment, social media. So their focus on being transparent and the way they manage relationships is definitely different. And it does help accelerate what their expectation is and understanding the different generations and what is expected. In any company, you need to take that into consideration because your relationships and your opportunity to really shift a culture may come from that young, entrepreneurial and transparent style of the younger generation. So I'll throw that out there.
And fostering that like, you know, intrapreneur, like within within a larger organization, and kind of fostering those conversations to come to the fore. So the management style, I think, of, you know, millennials and those folks are much more collaborative. They're not necessarily looking for they kind of assume buy-in, and then you have to, like, okay, step it back. Like, you got to take us on the journey with you sometimes, because they're just assuming you'll be for it, right? So sometimes just kind of like they need to provide more context for why we should go in a certain direction, right? But they don't have experience doing that, so they wouldn't know, right? So by us providing them with not guardrails, but like, these are kind of the parameters that you need to kind of tee up your new idea. These are the ways it's going to sell into the organization. These people may be a bigger hurdle to sell it into, and these might be some of the reasons why. So being able to have like those really transparent conversations, I think would only benefits the you know, the company and the customers. So being able to kind of tee up for them, like, how they need to, how they might need to approach or get their point across. We should be helping them do that, because they haven't had the experience to do it in the past.
Right.
Yeah, I love that, Adrienne, and I will say that the experience that leadership can bring those young upcoming leaders and CEOs can really help accelerate their ideas. And so that's where we all come into play.
Ricardo adds some great perspective there about giving a fresh perspective, but I think that also comes with diversity of everything, diversity of thought, diversity of people, diversity of generational, and without that, that's a key inclusiveness that we need to look at every level and the C-suite and across an organization to make sure that we're seeing all perspectives from everyone. So we started hitting this one a little bit, but it sort of plays back into the silo conversation. Are there any other tools or tips or techniques we can give people to break down? You know, we're talking about how to work better with Gen Z, Gen Y, but what about difficult silos or a traditional siloed organization? What tips do we have to work with those silos? IT wants to work with the business and learn from the business, but there are times where we're on the outside looking in. How do you break into that siloed group and become more collaborative? Specifically, what tools do you use when they don't want to collaborate with you?
Well, I'll give you an example. Robert, this goes back to when I was an IT executive, and we had number of business units. We were starting to see a lot of shadow IT at the time. And what I was seeing, so, you know, you're sitting in IT, you tend to have a very complete look across an organization and can usually see into what most people are up to and the directions that they're going. And I was seeing that some groups were at odds with each other. So outside of IT, but working on projects that, spending money on projects that potentially could have been pulled together. And so what I had done at the time was created a business task force. And I got the leadership across all the departments to come to the table because I took the time to talk to each of them individually and get their buy-in individually and share with them like the why behind why would we meet once a month to have these discussions. And I sort of played it as, you know, I want to share with you where technology is going and get your feedback. And that was true, but I also wanted to get all of them in the room together to talk to each other. Mm-hmm. And what we were able to do over time is create conversations where they were ultimately able to help each other and sort of streamline some of the work that they were doing, and realized that together they were able to accomplish initiatives perhaps that they were trying to do on their own in a way that was far more cost efficient and more efficient for the organization as a whole. So really putting them all at the table together to have the conversation where I was just facilitating, to be honest. I just wanted to see that outcome, and that worked really, really well for us.
Yeah. I love the idea of a task force. Especially for that, because often like in marketing, we'll have our own tech stack, right? And that's one of the things I do is I look at the tech stack and be like, you have a Maserati and you're driving it like a Yaris. What? No, like stop the spend on this. Okay, so these are sunk costs, right? Some of it's sunk cost. What else can we do with this tech stack? So that's gonna give you the ROI that you're actually looking for. So it's important for me to understand a team's tech, the full tech stack that they have. And so I'm often asking questions about like, what kind of DAM are you guys using? And does it talk to your CMS or does it talk to your CRM? Like, where are the connection points? Like, I'm trying to understand, like, do we need to get APIs written so that they do talk to each other? Like, it's really not that difficult, folks, right? But I hadn't really thought of having kind of like a tech task force. I really like that, Jessica. So like, I'm gonna take that as an idea and put that in my back pocket for my next project.
Jessica, you just got a compliment there.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that. And what I will add from a more one-on-one perspective for consideration is that if you're in IT, one of the biggest opportunities and needs today is for the technology mind to really cross into the business world. So if you can reach out one-on-one and say, hey, teach me, and start to pick up components that really increase your business acumen, you become very valuable in an organization. So I'll toss that out as a one-on-one.
I completely agree.
Well, that's fantastic. So as we come close to the end of the show, I realize there's so many other questions we're going to get to, and I'm just going to read a few of mine that we're not going to talk about here before I drop the next mic thing. For emerging leaders, what advice would you give them to build their relationships? What are some common misconceptions of building relationships at C-level you want to debunk? One I like is looking ahead, the importance and nature of building C-level alliances and what role does technology play in that? How do you build alliances with the remote workforce, right? All those things that we're going to look at. On the question I never asked you guys was, how about we do a part 2, which you all are going to agree to right now? Thank you.
Sure.
So great. So if we could leave everyone with some, just a little bit of good tools. So as we could wrap up, my last question for today would be, are there any actionable steps as leaders that the three of you would take to building stronger alliances with your organizations that you know now that you could give someone advice that they wouldn't have had in the past?
I'll take one. So one of the things that I've done in the past, and I probably should do more often, is, as a leader, how often do you, say, go out to lunch if you are in person, or virtually go out to lunch with individuals that might be outside of your sphere or your normal sphere, and sort of purposely putting yourself in situations where you're pulling people together, again, either in person in some sort of fashion, like lunch or something else, coffee, whatever it may be. How often are you doing that? And, how often are you going out of your way to participate with people that don't normally sit in your day-to-day but are valuable to the organization? So kind of what I would say is make a point to do that. Put yourself in that spot where, you take some time to get to know somebody who you don't normally work with.
Yeah, that's great. And as you do that, what I'll throw out for consideration is start to build your own database, tools. There's lots of tools out there that help you as you grow your network, and you're now looking at 1,000, 2,000. What are what's the timeline? What's the common hobbies, the communication connection that started that spider web, right? Because you'll have one person that introduces you to the next, Keep track of that. That's really important to understand how you got to know this person, and what was that common thread in that process. And then for leaders that are on the phone, as you're thinking about your cultures, make sure you consider how your culture stays relevant in this continual transformation that's happening now, this digital transformation.
Amen to that. So I'm going to actually riff on something both of you said. So I'm facilitating a series of design thinking workshops this week for my client, Sentient. They're a management consulting firm that focuses on people and culture. And so as we're stepping through this, we have IT and we have marketing and we have like the learning, the people are putting the online learning together, and those who are delivering the work to the client. So having that diversity of ideas is really important for us to have a successful outcome, right? And so we get to the end faster. If you're, lunching either virtually or in person, invite someone who's not from your team, connect them with someone else. And like sometimes, especially for the introverts, like that may be difficult, but by asking those people who maybe don't normally work together, the three of you sharing a meal or a coffee or whatever, it's going to make the conversation easier because there's another person. It's not one-on-one. You won't be as people fatigued because you were taking part in a conversation. Like with this, it was a round robin and we had organic conversation, right? So by, asking someone from IT and then asking someone from sales, we know the sales guys love to talk and they're really good at it, right? So always invite somebody from sales because they'll be like, getting all the conversation going and asking interesting questions. So, bringing people from different departments to those lunches and at different levels, right, Jessica? Like you're so that they can start to build those relationships and alliances as well. So making a point of whether it's, I call them Zoffy, a Zoom coffee, having Zoffy with people who you wouldn't normally connect with, or being in person and going out to lunch. So be uncomfortable, like Jessica said. Bring along more than one person so you don't have all that deer in the headlights anxiety about just talking one-on-one with someone, and you can help to build those bridges across the organization and at different levels.
I think, well, and listen, that's fantastic. And the only other thing I'd want to add to that one thing again is be aware of everyone around you. If you have awareness and there's someone who might be an introvert or shy, invite them to introduce someone or ask someone who's comfortable. So I didn't know a CMO or CPO that would come do the show. I called Jen Nash and said, Jen, do you know anyone? And then became Adrienne and Lisa, and we have our team here, right? So by asking someone who you are comfortable with to introduce you to someone who you don't know is a good way of building those relationships and expanding your network. And really, at the end of the day, that's what this is about, building a bigger network so you can help them. And if you're an authentic person helping them, they'll always come back and support you in the end. And I very much look forward to part 2, but I'm truly appreciative and honored to have spent the time we did today and the time leading up to here. I'm in the presence of greatness, and you all are great, and you have my love and appreciation for all this. So thank you for your time and everyone who came in with your questions. And please come back and tell your friends for part 2 because it'll be even better than this one.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for joining Leading in the Digital Era, hosted by Robert Field. Look for more Leading in the Digital Era, presented by the Institute for Digital Transformation, coming to a LinkedIn Live session soon. Can't join Robert for the live session? You can catch the replay anytime on our YouTube channel.